Yes.
Okay, good evening, everybody. And we move on now to part 3 of our series of Jewpernatural. And tonight we're going to be talking all about curses and the evil eye and the so-called protections against them, etc. Life seems to be replete with curses. God cursed the serpent in the Garden of Eden. King David was vehemently cursed by a specific enemy. The Montagues and the Capulets descended into unending rivalry when there was a curse, a plague on both your houses, for the cultured amongst you familiar with Shakespeare. And that's Romeo and Juliet. And even Harry Potter introduced a whole generation to a fictional world rife with curses. Curses and angry words wreaking havoc in the lives of people is as fascinating as it is ancient. What is the Jewish perspective? Should we be concerned with curses? And if so, is there any way to protect ourselves against them? I mean, to be sure, curses, of course, implies something verbally expressed. When something is expressed in such a way where you lash out at somebody, that's a curse. When it's nonverbal, that's what we know as the evil eye. Someone looking unfavorably upon you, thinking badly about you while they're looking at you, whether because of jealousy or because of anger or what have you. It's just a kind of metaphysical curse. That's what we know as the evil eye. So as per each week, I'm going to begin with an opening question. Who here is concerned with curses or the evil eye? And I'll add to that the question, do you feel that perhaps you may have been impacted by that in one way or another? And if so, what did you do about it? So let's first begin by anybody who actually just believes in it. We had a Sephardi just walk in. So do you believe in curses, Shaheen, the evil eye? Okay. Oh, we have a few hands here. You do? You do? Okay. As in you believe in the power of a curse?
Not sure.
That's what I'm asking. The power of a curse, the power of the evil eye.
Children given little red bangles and mug doves when they were born.
Okay.
Various older members of the family.
Red bands with a mug and dove.
Yes.
That's like a red band on steroids. It has an extra. Okay.
They're born all much older relatives.
I don't remember that.
Well, there you go. So some of you believe in the power of curses or the evil eye. Has anyone here, dare I ask, feel as though maybe they have been in some way affected by the evil eye?
I've seen it happen to someone.
No, I'm asking. You've seen it happen to someone. Okay.
So, back at school, one of my classmates was on crutches, and somebody else grabbed the crutches and started hopping around. And our teacher looked at him and said, "Don't do that because you don't need them. You're going to incur the need for them." He went outside, slipped over, needed crutches because he broke his leg.
And did he sue the teacher?
That's my.
For the record, this goes to the core of a Mishnah. What you're talking about, actually, there's a Mishnah that says very categorically, somebody who mocks being blind or crippled or anything like that, the Mishnah says, then that can adversely affect them. That's a little bit different. Albeit, yes, maybe by virtue of what your teacher said, or would have happened maybe without the teacher saying it. But okay. Anyone else here feel that it may have affected them?
Been affected by it, but I don't believe in it.
Then you haven't been affected by it.
Yes, I have. I got out of the swimming pool. One of my friends' wives said to my wife, "Oh, doesn't he look perfect?" I was very young at the time, doing body work. And she ran over to me to wrap a towel in me and fell in the pool. That's
Okay.
the only effect that
Fair enough.
I've ever
The things our wives will go to the lengths they'll go to just to, anyhow, right. Of course we know, for the point that you just made over here before, that words matter. Generally speaking, words can certainly shape reality, and words can impact in ways unimaginable. But what does that mean? Is it just a psychological impact? Like, we can all recall someone giving us words of encouragement, which really made a difference, or sometimes words that hurt, that also made a negative difference? Or does it imply also, when we say words matter, that it can actually have a spiritual impact, that somehow the very words themselves actually carry weight, such that what is expressed can indeed materialize? Is it the fact that the teacher said what he said is what caused the young man to fall? So let's begin with the curse of the billy goat. Have you ever heard of the curse of the billy goat? Okay, well, it was game number 4 of the 1945 World Series. That's American baseball. The Chicago Cubs versus the Detroit Tigers. A Chicago bar owner known as William Billy Goat Cianis tried to enter the Wrigley baseball field with his pet goat Murphy to watch his beloved team. He bought 2 tickets, in fairness, one for himself and one for his goat. And he had, in fact, brought the goat to Cubs games before. But this time, apparently the goat smelled really bad, and nearby fans started to complain. So security came along, and they told Cianis that the goat had to leave. And he decided to go and appeal directly to the actual club owner, P.K. Wrigley, yes, as in the era of the Wrigley's Gum Empire. And Wrigley decided to repeat the same allegation. Your goat stinks, quote unquote. Whereupon the furious Ciani turned around, cursed the team and said, them Cubs, they ain't going to win no more. And when the Cubs lost the World Series that year to the Detroit Tigers, Ciani sent a telegram to Wrigley saying, who stinks now? What happened afterwards? The Cubs repeatedly came agonizingly close to winning many times over, but never did. They became famous as the lovable losers. They made themselves into the World Series numerous times, which is like what you would call over here the finals, the playoffs, or what have you. And they were known as the lovable losers. It wasn't until literally 2016, 1945, 2016, when the Cubs won the World Series for the first time, actually, since 1908, ending 108 years without a championship and 71 years since that curse began. So, would you attribute that to fate? Or would you attribute that to just bad luck, or indeed to the curse of Billy Goat?
Somebody was kidding. Oh.
So what would you attribute it to? And he said it. It happened, certainly for a very long time. Well,
What's changed that they won it in 2016?
I don't know, maybe curses have an expiry date.
Maybe
Maybe somebody else came along with a blessing that overrode the curse. Don't know.
Or maybe just the team wasn't quite good enough.
Okay, so that's the question. Does one attribute it to a curse, or does one go ahead?
What about Kennedy curse?
The Kennedy curse, yes.
Yeah.
And that actually came from a certain great rabbi at the time because of certain circumstances that happened in the war and what have you. And it's true. It's a fair point. It's an interesting one which I didn't think about. So yeah, okay, all these things raise a number of significant questions. Go on.
Right before the curse happened, because if they were always just about to lose anyway, then we would just be continuing their pattern.
Oh, that's true. So that's why I actually made the point about the fact that it was a total of 108 years. In other words, from 1908, when I think the club was first founded, they hadn't won anything anyway. Now we fast forward all the way to 1945, and they still didn't win anything until 2016. So yes, you're right. It could be. It's just everyone always talked about the curse of Billy Goat or the curse of the Billy Goat. His death date.
Did he die the year the curse was lifted?
Oh, that's a very good question. I have to assume if he was old enough to, yeah, could have still been alive in 2016. I mean, you would have assumed him to be in 1945 with a goat. He would have probably been in his early 20s, possibly. So yeah, maybe. I'll look into that one.
98.
Sorry?
1998.
Oh, there you go. He died in 1998. Quick response. Yes.
That of Lashon Hara.
Well, let's stay focused for the moment. It's a fair question, but we'll come into that. Some take the story in the light in which it is intended. Others point to it, indeed, as proof that jinxes and curses can in fact be real. And they'll go to great lengths to therefore avoid them. So coming back to last week, if you remember when we were talking about zodiacs, Mazel Tov. Notwithstanding what we spoke about, that is the deeper meaning of good zodiac, its literal meaning is good luck, which implies we believe in luck, or conversely, curses. Regarding the evil eye, the Encyclopedia Britannica states the evil eye is an ancient idea, which occurred in ancient Greece and Rome, in Jewish, Islamic, Buddhist, and Hindu traditions, and in peasant and other folk societies, and has persisted throughout the world in modern times. In Western society, most people disregard the belief in the power of the evil eye as mere superstition. But still, there are a considerable number of people who do attribute significance to it. And that's why many people wear red strings. It's even popular among celebrities like Madonna, Call Me Esther. And don't we, after all, hear the expression Kanahara, which actually means Kainayin Hara, which means the word Kain means no, not, no Ayin Hara. So Kanahara is actually Kainayin which means no Ayin Hara. So therein lies the question, and let's analyze. Let's begin, as we do each week, with the Torah. There is a categorical prohibition, and this is it. Do not curse a deaf person. Now, there's the obvious question. Why not do not curse any person, regardless of their hearing capabilities? What does it mean, do not curse a deaf person? And the answer is that it goes without saying that one shouldn't curse anyone. And lest you might think that that would only matter regarding someone who can hear and therefore be insulted by what you're saying, hence don't curse them, says the Torah, do not curse even a deaf person. Meaning it's not just about their dignity or the potential offense that you might cause them with your words, that is the psychological impact. It's every bit about the curse itself. When you curse a deaf person, there is no psychological impact. They can't hear what you're saying. But there is a spiritual impact. The curse itself carries weight. Hence, says the Torah, do not curse even a deaf person. So there you have it. The Torah clearly emphasizes the idea of the spiritual power of a curse. Now, the classic commentaries observe this point, and to quote one, known as the Sefer HaChinuch, 13th century author unknown, but a brilliant and classical work analyzing every single one of the mitzvot of the Torah. And he says, we cannot understand the mechanism through which a curse can affect the subject, but we know that all people, that is Jew and non-Jew alike, take curses seriously, even when uttered by an ordinary person, even by Billy Goat. The point is, there's a paranormal impact which is real and universally accepted. And this is clearly implied by their prohibition extended even to a deaf person. To take this further, if curses are real, then they can impact even if the subject of the curse isn't there, isn't aware, doesn't know. I mean, again, if it can impact a deaf person who's not hearing what you're saying, then it can impact anybody, anywhere. When you stand in your own bedroom and decide to curse somebody, it can still take effect. To quote again the words, or to use the analogy of the Sefer HaChinuch, if somebody punches you in the face, your nose will hurt just the same, even if you have no idea where that punch came from and who gave it. And so too with curses. Now, Maimonides, true to his rationalist style, as we've demonstrated previously, does not ascribe any paranormal effects to the notion of a curse. It's purely the psychological effect, he says. So, what's the obvious question? Come on. If it's a psychological effect, then what's the issue again about cursing the deaf person? What's the problem with cursing him? And the answer, says Maimonides, is the effect that it has on the character of the cursor, the person doing the cursing. It's not nice, it's offensive, and it's obnoxious behavior. Even as he says, there is clearly no harm to the deaf person because it's all about psychological impact. And there is no psychological impact on a deaf person. What does it say about you, the person doing the cursing? It slowly erodes your character into extreme insensitivity. It nurtures bad personality traits. Thus, says Maimonides, the prohibition is therefore even in respect to the person himself, purely because of the way it impacts on him. Now let's consider what the Talmud says. So here you have, by the way, again, a perfect example of somewhere in the Torah itself that seems to imply categorical power to curses. And then Maimonides' example of flipping it and saying, no, it's not about that. You can't prove from there. Curses don't have an effect. That's just about the person doing the cursing. If you look at the Talmud, the great sage Rava once served as judge. He adjudicated over a particular case. And when the litigant who was there, who lost the case, he cursed Rava. He was upset. He said, "May your ship sink." And those present took it very seriously. So much so that they tried to protect Rava by replicating the experience of sinking. So they soaked his clothes that he was wearing in water to somehow channel the energy of the curse. What would happen if your boat sinks? You're in the water. Not necessarily that he should drown, but his boat should sink and his possessions should go down with it. So like this, they just soaked his clothing. So he should have the effect, if you will, of what would happen if he ends up in the water. And therefore maybe channel the energy of the curse in that direction. It was to no avail. The ship he was on did in fact sink. However, all his possessions and all his merchandise were ultimately spared. And in the words of the Talmudic commentaries, God sometimes allows a curse to manifest symbolically, but not in a way that causes real harm to a righteous person. So his possessions were ultimately protected. Of course, that begs the question, well, then what would Maimonides do with that Talmudic story? Or what about the other curses that we do find in the Torah? Like Noah cursing his grandson Ham. Bilam wanting to curse the Jewish nation such that God had to turn them all around into blessings. He doesn't address any of that. But I suggest to you that he would likely suggest that it is a matter of sometimes maybe God allowing for the curses to take hold, even if the person themselves doesn't have that power. Perhaps. Let's pause here on the curses and let's move on to the evil eye. Beginning again first with the Torah. Abraham and Sarah are married for a significant length of time, and they have no children. Sarah gives her handmaid, Hagar, who was an original Egyptian princess, over to Abraham in marriage so that he can carry on his offspring through her. She immediately becomes pregnant, as a result of which Hagar taunts Sarah. She taunts her about this, like, obviously there's something wrong with you. You give this facade of being a righteous woman, but look at me, and I'm with your husband. I get married one night, and that's it. I'm already pregnant, and you all these years, and you're not. Sarah was so bitter that she had sent her away from home. Torah tells us that story. But more than that, we're told also that Hagar had miscarried. And only later, when she came back, she fell pregnant again, and later had Ishmael. Why and how did she miscarry the first time? Says Rashi, the commentator par excellence on the Chumash, Sarah cast an evil eye upon her. So you have a very clear example over here of where the Torah itself clearly attributes the whole notion of evil eye and acknowledges the reality. Now let's move on to another example. Jacob's 12 sons. We'll be reading about them over the next couple of weeks. We're already introduced to them in our Torah portions. When they're coming down into Egypt with half in mind to go try and find their brother Joseph, but at the same time to acquire food at the time when there was a hunger, they were all big and strong, and Jacob instructs that they do not enter Egypt all through the same gate. Rather, each one should go through a different city entrance. Later, of course, Joseph, who was viceroy, and they didn't know who he was, he picked up on this, he was aware of this, and he accused them as a way of just trying to exercise whatever influence on them. And he said, you must be spies because of the fact that you came in through all these different entrances. If you were really brothers and you were coming in innocently, you would have all come in together. But why did Jacob instruct that they all go in a separate gate? So as Rashi again says, to avoid the evil eye. When the tribes were blessed at the end of his life by their father Jacob, many were compared to different animals, the strength of a lion, the swiftness of a deer, etc. Joseph was blessed to be like the fish. They are deep in the water, unseen, hence impervious to the evil eye. Says the Mishnah, jumping ahead from the Torah, in the Ethics of Our Fathers, Rabbi Yehoshua said, 3 things drive a person from this world: an evil eye, the evil inclination, and the hatred of another. So the second of these 3 things, evil inclination, well, that makes sense. It's our animalistic traits and our appetitive powers and passions, which if we seek to cave into, well, that will drive us from this world. In other words, it'll make us lose total focus of life. The third is also obvious, hatred of another. Hatred is lethal, and left to fester, it creates turmoil in a person's life, and when manifest, it impacts all of society. The second temple was destroyed on account of baseless hatred. It drives a person from this world. But what do we mean when we say the evil eye can also drive a person from this world? One great 15th century Rabbi Shimon ben Samach cites the Maimonides, who again explains it rationally. Evil eye means simply greediness. Being greedy can drive people from the world because the obsessive pursuit of wealth can literally result in people doing all kinds of crazy things or dangerous things. That's what Maimonides says. Again, he's explaining the notion of evil eye on a very basic and practical level. He disregards any deeper spiritual significance, as he does with curses. Comes and carries on Rabbi Shimon, and he says, I disagree with Maimonides. The Talmudic definition of the evil eye is indeed looking upon another on their possessions with jealousy or hatred, and that can cause material damage to the other person. King David ordered Job to do a head count of the Jewish people. Job protested, insisting it should not be done because it can evoke the evil eye. Indeed, God instructs in the Torah that when we do a census, the census is done by everybody contributing a half shekel, a half coin, not by finger pointing, counting out and accentuating the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. King David insisted, so Job proceeded, and a plague struck the Jewish people. Do you know that by virtue of that story, and as brought in the Gemara, when we want to count a minyan in Shul, we want to make sure we have a minyan. We don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, counting to 10. We're not sure. We actually take a verse. There's a verse in the Psalms. It's a beautiful verse. It's also a beautiful song. He who saves the nation blesses his inheritance, that is in reference to God, etc. It's 10 words. So we would count like that instead of finger pointing and counting. All because of avoiding the evil eye. Let's consider some other practical things, in addition to not counting people, that we do to avoid the evil eye. The Talmud says it's permissible to compel a neighbor to share in the building of a fence of a shared garden. So I share a garden together with you. I want to now go ahead and build a fence to protect my part of the garden. I can compel you to share in the cost of building that fence. Why? Because I could legitimately be concerned about you looking upon my growing crop with jealousy and thus casting an evil eye, and therefore you would harm my crop. Jewish law. The warden should know this. Of course he does. It's permissible to call two brothers or a father and son, one after the other, to the Torah. But we avoid doing so in order to avoid the evil eye. That is to say, if you're going to call up a father and a son, people, nachas, people look, father, son, or whatever. They look at the two brothers. And again, it's accentuating, highlighting something, which can cause other people, trigger reactions, unfavorable reactions, possibly in other people. And perhaps one of the most famous ones, which you may or may not have been familiar, you're familiar with the custom, but you may not have been familiar with the reason why. Yisker, very good. People who have parents alive leave the shul. One of the reasons is simply so that we don't create discombobulation in the shul. That is to say, some are saying it and some are not saying it. And then there's disparity when a prayer is being said in the shul where many aren't, many are, etc. But another reason given is because those people who do still, thank God, have parents and they remain within without saying the prayer for lack of need, others who do have to say it would look on enviously upon them and cast an evil eye. And whilst I often thought to myself, it's a bit of a far stretch, quite amazingly, not all that long ago, somebody who was quite young and lost his mother, also at quite a young age, a few years back, told me that he gets it. He told me that sometimes he would look enviously upon other people, like, lucky you. You know, you're my contemporary, you're my age, you're also in your early 30s. You still have your parents. I don't. There was a certain jealousy there. Not that he wished bad on the other person, but there was a jealousy there that I lost my mother. She's only 64 when she passed. You still have yours. And that can cause evil eye. That's why we encourage people who do still, thank God, have their loved ones to nevertheless go outside. And all those who are sharing in their own sadness of loss are together inside. So the bare bones conclusion at this point is that the mainstream, albeit not unanimous consensus, is that curses and evil eyes are a real concept. I could leave you with that and have you all go home a little bit anxious and worried, but let's take it to another level. And that's to consider in the first instance, how do they work? What is the mechanism behind them through which they operate? Rabbi Chaim Ibn Itar, he is a famous 18th century commentary and mystic. You'll find him in many, many, many Chumashim. He writes the following, referring back to the earlier analogy. Think of a fist. Just like a fist is what is required to hit someone, so too even your very gaze can be a metaphysical fist that can also cause harm. Some sources speak about a certain fire or a spark, a type of energy that emerges from an envious person's eyes. You know, the expression, he's giving me the evils, which refers to someone staring at you menacingly. In modern terminology, we'd probably call this sort of energy being expressed. Or by way of a better analogy, think of electricity. Okay, electric currents are not visible to the human eye, but they are released from generators and that pass unseen through numerous wires, and then they cause tangible consequences when they eventually meet their targets and cause the lights to go on and whatever else besides. And so too it is with curses and indeed with the evil eye. The envious gaze or the harsh utterance can unleash a current of negative energy to their target. We're going to call this the fist theory. After quoting this theory, Rabbi Chaim Ibn Itar outrightly, personally rejects this. He questions the whole divine justice in this theory. I mean, he says, wherein is the justice? If a person is deserving of something negative, God forbid, befalling them, does God need my curse or my evil eye to make that happen? What's it got to do with me? And if that person is undeserving of such consequences, why should I be able to have that kind of sway and power over them? Just because I choose to look upon them, if they're deserving for whatever the reason, God can deal with it in his own way. It doesn't need me. And if they're undeserving, then why should I have the power to trigger that? Why should I have the power? Just because I am suddenly jealous of them or hate them or whatever it is, why should I have the ability through that to be able to harm them? Kind of gives me almost a superpower because I can behave like that towards everybody. Rather, he says it's not a natural process. It's a spiritual one. And he elaborates, but without getting into his elaboration, I'm going to explain what he says using my own added analogy. Like the following. There are two major influences in every child's life. There's the parent or the parents, and there are the teachers. Imagine a child is late for school, or a child skips class. What happens? Well, they'll get a detention for truancy, unless they have a really good excuse. Now, imagine the same child comes home late. Is mom going to make them stand in the corner or give them a detention? By and large, where a teacher disciplines with more strictness and sternness, a parent ultimately disciplines with a lot more compassion. And the same reality is with God. Initially, we're told, at the beginning of Genesis and the way Rashi and the Medrash and all comment, God wanted to create the world with strict discipline and judgment, with his attribute of judgment, as we've spoken about previously, to rule the world like a teacher, if you will. But he saw there's no way that we as civilization going forward would ever be able to properly endure because we are very fallible. It would be too difficult if we had to endure consequences every time we did wrong. On the other hand, to create the world with unbridled compassion would also be counterproductive because then we get away with everything. We become spoiled brats without any concern, without any consequences. So the Medrash tells us God mixed the two together with compassion, basically more compassion, but also some strict discipline and justice. Sometimes, therefore, and most often, the compassion is prevalent, which is why we get so many passes, even if perhaps we might be undeserving. Sometimes, thankfully less often, God's attribute of judgment might be manifest. To be sure, and this has to be stressed, and I cannot stress it enough, the attribute of justness, judgment, or discipline, it's not bad, and it certainly isn't cruel. It's simply justice, and precisely so. When it is activated, then a person is more carefully scrutinized to determine whether they are otherwise truly deserving the benevolence and the compassion being shown to them. So generally speaking, there's benevolence shown to you. Yes, God is kind to me, and God has given me blessings, and God is looking after me, etc., etc. If the attribute of justice and judgment is going to be activated, then all of a sudden I'm going to be scrutinized. And I'm going to be scrutinized, am I actually deserving of all those blessings, of that added compassion, of all the goodness that's being shown upon me? So my harsh words about another person, or my harsh gaze upon another person, can trigger a reciprocal or corresponding response from above. God was showing much compassion to this person, even as they may have been completely undeserving, because that's the nature of compassion. But by my cursing them, I'm triggering the divine discipline and judgment, which in turn can evoke scrutiny. Are you actually truly deserving of this kindness which I am showing you? If the answer is yes, hey, great, enjoy. If the answer is no, then that kindness can be removed. And this is triggered as a direct result of the curse or the bad case. So it's not the case that my curse or my evil eye has power over you. It is the case, however, that my curse and my evil eye can elicit some scrutiny from above. And if the end result is no good, and goodness or blessings are subsequently removed, ultimately that's because of your conduct, not my curse. Albeit I triggered your conduct to be more closely scrutinized. So this is what we'll call the trigger theory. Bottom line, the evil eye and curses are clearly not superstitions at all. They are part of an entire system of judgment and lifestyle. And we have either the fist theory or the trigger theory. Either way, from my part, whether I'm, by virtue of the curse, using my fist, as it were, doing some direct damage to you, or by virtue of the trigger theory, it's wrong. And it's indeed forbidden. The fist theory, because just as it's wrong for me to hit you with my hand, it's equally wrong for me to harm you with my words or my malevolent eyes. And even the trigger theory, if I'm looking upon you in a judgmental way or cursing you with my words, I'm adversely affecting you, triggering extra scrutiny from above, whether you see my glance or whether you hear my curse or not. And that's wrong. What right do I have to do that? And even according to Maimonides, what does that say about me? What does that say about my character, being so mean-spirited towards another person? And finally, regardless of anything, those who live in glass houses, right? I mean, at the end of the day, perhaps my looking at you in a judgmental way makes the heavens do the same. But what makes me better? Why am I looking at you like that? I should be looking at myself. I should be looking to fix myself. I should be looking to deal with myself, not looking to trigger judgment upon another person or just simply harming another person. And that's key. At the end of the day, therein lies the real essential prohibition, that by virtue of me behaving that way towards you, and that comes to the core of Lashon Hara, when I choose to speak badly about you, yes, the words I say can matter. And by the way, there's a flip side to this in terms of praise as well. We'll come to that. The words I say matter. And therefore, when I'm speaking Lashon Hara about you, even if it's not true, by me saying something bad about you, it's if there's even a subtle potential of that within you, it's triggering that in you. And that's on me, because who am I and what right do I have to be the one to do that? So those are the outstanding facts regarding evil eye and regarding curses. But the bottom line is there's potential there. They're real. They can be harmful, God forbid. So can I protect against it? And what can I do? If somebody is that way inclined, such they curse me or they look with evil eye upon me, am I just therefore an inevitable consequence of that? Or is there something that I can do to protect myself against that? I walk into shul on a Shabbat. I don't know, and I cannot control what other people are saying or thinking. Can I ward off any potential negativity? So let's consider some of the traditional protections that we know about. You know, there's the chamsa. Sephardim are big into the chamsa, and there's a reason for that. It's the upside down hand with various holy words written upon it. Chamsa is like chamesh. It means it comes from the word five. And believe it or not, the great Sephardic mystic and halachist, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, writes that a customary method of protection against the evil eye is fashioning the letter He, which is the Hebrew letter with the numerical value of 5, from silver. And it's also customary to say chamsa, chamsa, chamsa for protection. That's number one. Number two, the famous Ben Ish Chai quotes this same Rabbi Azulai and added the custom similar of people hanging pieces of wood in the shape of a palm with 5 fingers drawn on it and the letter He, again, number 5, etched into it. Why 5? So my own research actually led me to learn that 5 fingers is a reminder of God's protection. Nachmanides notes that the human hand with its 5 fingers reflects the presence of God's guiding hand, as it were, God's guiding power in creation. It's like the hand blocking the evil. Also, the number 5 corresponds to the Hebrew letter He, as we said, which is the letter that God added to both Abraham and Sarah's names. It represents revelation, spiritual expansion, and therefore the custom is especially prevalent amongst Sephardim in North Africa and Middle East, because it's sourced by 2 great, well-known Sephardic mystics and rabbis. Another common protection, already since Talmudic times, is an amulet, often with God's name on it or angels' names on it, as well as specific verses from the Torah. One particular amulet, which is quite prevalent, is Psalm 121 on it. That's the one we sing every Shabbat. It's brought in many holy sources that a newborn mother should have that psalm on a card or whatever, somewhere near her as protection for her and her newborn. In addition, you'll find in many Siddurim, certainly in mine as well, that one should say the psalm, even though we don't normally say psalms at night. When we mentioned the other week about saying Shema at night as protection against dreams, that one says Psalm 121 each night before going to sleep as well. And we cannot ignore, of course, the Kabbalah red string. Sorry, it's a full custom. It's not sourced anywhere. It's a tradition that is connected to Kever Rachel, Rachel's tomb, where red wool is wrapped around the tomb as a symbol of protection and the maternal love, etc. Yes, people wear it as a reminder of spirituality to ward off negative energy and as a symbolic shield of holiness. It's not a magic charm. Many rabbis discourage it, indeed treat it as superstition. The power is psychological and symbolic, unlike the other ones mentioned, which clearly do have some kind of metaphysical power. But I'm going to leave it at that for now. I will endeavor to circle back to it in a little bit. So all that said, and now that we're left thinking to ourselves, okay, how many of you are running out to the Judaica shop in Edgware tomorrow to buy a chamsa? Because I did a deal with her for everyone she sells tomorrow. The Lubavitcher Rebbe once told somebody who expressed concern about the evil eye. The Rebbe, rather than advising her to secure one of those aforementioned protective omens, wrote, if your mezuzot, we talked about this previously, are kosher, and you are conducting yourself generally appropriately in accordance with Jewish law and values, then it is absolutely impossible for the evil eye to affect you. That's a powerful statement. And in another instance, the Rebbe advised someone that giving tzedakah helps to ward off the evil eye. Let's consider these points. If somebody does mitzvot, then you are in a place of greater worthiness. because you did mitzvot, you're doing goodness, such that even if scrutiny is triggered, your many good deeds will also be highlighted. So if you're being scrutinized, everything gets scrutinized, not just the negatives, but also the positives, thus thereby rendering you worthy of all the blessings you deserve. And similarly, tzedakah. Tzedakah, of course, is a super powerful tool. It is one of the three things that we reference always in Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, in the famous Unatana Tokev prayer, Uteshuva, Utefillah, Utzedakah, as one of the three things that can remove any negative decree. Our sages tell us the mitzvah of tzedakah is tantamount to the fulfillment of all mitzvot. Why? Because you put your heart and soul into making your money, and now you're taking some of that money and you're doing a mitzvah with it by giving it away to tzedakah. So when you take your hard-earned money and you give away some to tzedakah, it's like you're giving away your whole essence for the sake of a mitzvah. That's a form of tremendous self-sacrifice and ultimate mitzvah, ultimate protection. There is another thing to consider in all of this, and that is not to be understated. Privacy. The one thing that triggers the evil eye more than anything is the modern day slogan, if you've got it, flaunt it. People like to be flash. People like to be ostentatious. That's not a sin, but it certainly attracts attention, and that in turn can still bring the negative reactions from others. Modesty is a virtue. The Talmud teaches blessings rest only on that which is hidden from the eye. That's the language. When your life is lived with a degree of privacy, your success, your wealth, your spiritual growth, it remains protected. What is flaunted becomes eminently vulnerable. And that applies to relationships, that applies to wealth, that applies to achievements, that applies to beauty, that applies to physical appearances, and even spiritual accomplishments. Anything overly displayed can become exposed spiritually. And the most classic case in point is Bilam. Bilam, the sorcerer from Mesopotamia, came along with his own unique spiritual powers to curse the Jewish people. His entire spiritual method was grounded in the power of the evil eye. He believed that if he could cast a gaze of negativity, jealousy, or spiritual exposure upon them, then he would weaken their divine protection. But when he lifts his eyes towards the camp of the Israelites, something unexpected happens. Instead of unleashing a curse, he declares, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, how goodly are your tents, O Jacob. And these words have become so foundational that they open our daily prayer service every single morning. What's so goodly about their tents such that what he saw changed everything, and indeed such that we reference it first thing in the morning? And the answer is, the entrances of their tents were not facing towards one another. That's the simple statement of the rabbis in the Talmud, which by definition means nobody was peering into somebody else's life. Nobody was flaunting their blessings or exposing their private world to unnecessary attention. Every family maintained a sense of dignity. They had boundaries. There was modesty. There was sacred privacy. And that was precisely why Bilam therefore could not curse them. The evil eye feeds off jealousy. It feeds off exposure. And where lives are lived with humility and respect for what should remain private, there is no opening for spiritual harm. Bilam came to curse them, and he ends up blessing them instead. Why? Because privacy is not just good habit. It's actually a genuine channel for blessings. When we guard what is intimate, our families, our personal achievements, our successes, our spiritual growth, we create space for the divine presence. And blessings, therefore, as the Talmud tells us, flourish in what is hidden from the eye. Publicity invites scrutiny. Modesty invites protection. And that's exactly why we cite that first thing in the morning as the beginning of each day to give us perspective for the rest of the day. And then there is this. In one instance, which I know personally, and I heard this story when I was studying in Miami back in 1984. About there was a woman and her husband, and they had a very successful luggage business. And he had all the paperwork and all the prints and all the whatever associated documents to do with the business. And he was in Vegas for a big conference. And unfortunately, there was a massive fire in that particular hotel and everything got burnt. And he had no recourse other than insurance. But that went on for years and years and years. And she came to the Rebbe And she asked the Lubavitch Rebbe, I'm worried that maybe I and Hara because of our successes. And the Rebbe said to her, if you don't worry yourself about it, then it won't affect you. Just as simple as that. And I was in Israel when I was on sabbatical. I happened to walk into her in the shul that my son davened at, and I asked her to repeat the story, and she said, yes, absolutely so. And she said, it took a lot of years, but thank God the insurance finally paid out. Masses and masses, a long time later. But what does it mean? In light of everything we just said, if you don't worry yourself about it, then it won't affect you. I mean, we just demonstrated otherwise. The Baal Shem Tov famously taught, a person is where their thoughts are. Your thoughts create your inner reality. If your mind is full of anxiety and anticipation of harm, you are on some level inviting that possibility into your space. But the opposite is equally true. If your thoughts are rooted in bitachon, calm, trust, self-assurance, and a sense of recognizing that you are always under divine protection, then there's simply no opening for the evil eye. Your mindset itself becomes the shield. This is what the Rambam means. If you don't believe in it, it will not affect you. Not because it magically disappears, but because belief shapes perception. Perception shapes spiritual vulnerability. And vulnerability determines whether negativity can enter. In other words, curses and the evil eye need your fear to feed off. Remove the fear and it loses its power. When you live with calmness, with serenity, with conviction, God is watching over me, then you're not spiritually exposed. Then your internal world is properly stable and it's sealed and it's protected. So the greatest protection against the evil eye is not a string. It's not even an amulet. It's not even a symbol or a chamsa. It's a strong, steady, healthy mindset. Which actually takes me back to the red string, because as I mentioned, there's no source for its protective powers, but it can still function in that sense on a spiritual, psychological level. In other words, if you believe it protects you, then wearing it will place your mind in a very calm, confident state. And therefore you will feel guarded, not exposed. And therefore your mindset alters. So your belief in that protection creates the emotional stability that will then provide the protection. The red string works not because of mystical properties or because the red string is somehow protecting you, but because it's shifting your mindset, almost like a placebo, from fear to confidence. And that shield itself is spiritually protective. The string is not the power, your thoughts are the power. And when your thoughts are grounded, then negativity simply has nowhere to attach itself. Another story, actually, to illustrate this point, which I kind of more or less heard firsthand. When, again, referring to the Lubavitch Rebbe, when the Lubavitch Rebbe was going to become Rebbe back in the early 1950s, very early 1950s, he had a brother-in-law. And there were some within the wider family who wanted the brother-in-law to become the next Hasidic Rebbe, to succeed the father-in-law. The Rebbe did not want to become Rebbe. It was the Hasidim who were pushing him and encouraging it at the time. But there were some who specifically wanted the brother-in-law. And when the moment came and the moment was right, so the Gabbai and the Shul called up the Rebbe at the time with the particular, when he assumed the mantle of leadership, and with a special title that is associated with the call up to the Torah. And that kind of solidified it. But one elderly woman who was a family member was upset because she wanted the other family member, the brother-in-law. So when she saw the Gabbai afterwards, she actually cursed him. Zos nicht eis leben de Jahr. You shouldn't live out this coming year. And he got very spooked. Well, first of all, she cursed. We talked about the power. Second of all, he got spooked. And that's the fear that could invite in the power. So he went to the Rebbe in a private audience, and the Rebbe laughed and reassured him and said to him, a klola von an alte Frau is a bracha. A curse from an old woman is a blessing. Now, what does that mean? I suggest maybe the curse would have had substance, especially, and it was a very harsh curse. But the Rebbe's comment to him was in itself a blessing, and also helped him reconfigure his mindset, because if the Rebbe is saying that, then I have nothing to worry about in regard to the curse. He was like in his early 30s at the time. He lived till his late 90s. Final thought, and this is an important one. There's a flip side to all of this. Because if there are curses, then there are also blessings. There's an evil eye, there's also a good eye. If curses can impact because words matter, then so can blessings. Thus says the Talmud, do not treat the blessings of a simple person lightly. In other words, blessings from a very holy person are certainly powerful. But don't deny yourself and don't underestimate the blessings offered by anyone. Those words too can channel positive energy. Words matter. They too can have a very real impact. And therefore, it's actually good practice to often bless somebody. Is that not, after all, what we always say, oh, bless you, or God bless you, or be well, or sei gesund. And these are all meaningful, each in their own way. I was 1 year into marriage, and Chani and I were in Israel, and she was pregnant at the time with my oldest Mati, and she was, I think, in her middle of the 8th month. And but she carried light, and whatever she was wearing at the time, and it wasn't obvious to anybody, or even if it was, nobody necessarily commented until the very last day. We're getting on a bus to go back to where we were staying to pack up and go to the airport. And as a woman, as there are often by the kotel, it's staka, and I was inclined to just give it a miss, as one might do, because there's so many. And then I don't know why, I just stopped. I had whatever few shekel left in my pocket. I took it out and I gave it to her. She turned around to Chani and she said, Shia maher, Shia ben zachar, Shia maher. It should be quick, it should be quick, it should be a boy, it should be quick. I went back to New York. Chani went to London. I flew from New York to meet her a week later, 1 month before Mati was due. And Mati was born. It was a boy, and boy was it quick. Don't underestimate the power of anybody's blessing. And similarly, to quote one great 15th century sage, when you look at your fellow with a good eye, you give them blessings and you receive blessings yourself. There's a lot of goodness that is stored up there for every single one of us. Sometimes we may not be deserving to appropriately access it for whatever the reason. But by virtue of someone else blessing you or giving you a good eye, as it were, sometimes that's enough to open the channels and bring that upon you. Moreover, when we look favorably upon somebody else and we bless one another, that enhances peace and unity in the world. And in the powerful words of our sages elsewhere, there is no vessel that secures goodness for Israel other than peace. So when we share that with other people and we express that with other people, first of all, we're opening up channels for them. And if we open up channels for them, then channels open up for us as well. And second of all, when we do that and we behave like that towards one another, we're enhancing peace, and peace is the ultimate vessel that can bring peace, can bring blessings upon all of us. So, on that note, may you all be blessed, and may you all experience only goodness in your lives. Next up, and next week, the finale, demons, angels, and the afterlife. Right, we'll pause here, and we'll take a few questions, if there are any.
Well, if nobody else is asking a question.
Sorry? Yeah, go on.
May I ask?
Please do.
Question. After the recent war between Israel and Iran,